All right. Okay. Maybe we could finish chapter 5. I want to set the scene for you again. But there's even more to this scene than we've kind of talked about. Because, okay, I tell you all the time, the Greek is a logos to telos, and it's an unstated telos. And you say, well, I don't, why would you not state a conclusion or a telos? Well, I want to tell you right now that we don't do it all the time. I'm going to give you a hint about that. If Martin Luther knew we were having a service on Sunday, what would he expect there to be at that service every Sunday?
Communion.
Eucharist, exactly. We don't, on certain Sundays and certain services, don't have a Eucharist or communion. It's an unstated thing that Martin Luther, every Anglican, every Orthodox, every Catholic would expect to come to a Sunday service and have Eucharist. And you know what we call Sundays? Festival days. Sunday is a festival day, right? And you break your fast, you have Eucharist, and you can eat meat, by the way, if it's Lent or another, penitential season. Now, this is important because let's cast this back into the Greek era. Let's cast this back to the time of Christ. Okay, our scene, Jesus went to the well, the Bethesda, the pool of Bethesda. There's a big one that's a reservoir where he healed the guy, and there's a little one that's the mikvah. Why would Jesus go into the mikvah? He was going to eat the sacrifice. Do you think he brought a sacrifice with him?
Probably, he could have.
He's going to a festival. It says right at the beginning, in 5:1, Jesus went to the festival, to Horta, to the Jewish festival. It doesn't tell us which one. We have no idea. What do you do at a festival?
You bring your sacrifice.
Exactly. The Greeks did this. But the word Horta in Greek, the word meaning festival that is translated to festival, what do you do at a Greek festival? Epithumia, the scent of the sacrifice. You cook the meat. You eat the meat. Okay. The Jewish temple, they usually boiled the meat. Oh man, I'm not sure that'd be great. Maybe they make good beef stock. I don't know. But when people, roasted steak grilled on the grill is wonderful. A boiled steak, okay. But you realize, right? If all you got is grilled, and somebody comes up, and by the way, remember I told you about pots. We got to think about the world. The ancient world is a place unlike our world. The only places that had pots up to even the Middle Ages were inns or churches or temples, and they could make soup and stews. Anybody ever wonder why in every Robin Hood novel, in every Robin Hood story, where are they going to eat? The inn to eat the soup, right? And get the beer, the ale, the cheese, because that's where the food was, and you could prepare it. Because if we went home, did you have a pot? Nobody could afford them. The only place,
How do you make gruel at home without a pot?
Well, that is a great question, because I don't think I taught a class in this, but I've written about it quite a lot. You can prepare some stuff in not ceramic, but heated, baked, clay baked stuff, pottery. It's hard to do, and you got to do it in an oven. You can't do it over a direct flame, right? You have to do it, somehow in a non-direct way to get it hot enough so it doesn't crack and break. Schlemmertopf. Schlemmertopf? You know what Schlemmertopf is?
It's the German pot, and you have to soak it in water for 15 minutes, and then you put your meat in it, and then we have one, and I love it, and it cooks a wonderful chicken.
It's an unfired pot. And what you do is you soak it in water so the water protects the pot from cracking and breaking when you put it into an oven. But you can never put it over direct fire. Direct fire, you have to have metal. And you can't just have any metal, right? Gold, silver doesn't work. Bronze, maybe ish copper. Nope, no way. It can melt and burn, yeah. You can have copper or whatever. Anyway, so anyway, Jesus went to this pool at Bethsaida, to mikvah, to bring a sacrifice, most likely. The thing we don't ever think about, it never tells us that Jesus went to bring a sacrifice, right? Or to eat a sacrifice, or to eat teruma. Why? It's presumed, exactly. That's why I started by saying, what would Martin Luther presume by our Sunday service? That would have communion, because that's what everybody does in Orthodox churches. And I'm not complaining or saying as a negative. It's just what we expect in our culture and what he expects in his culture are very different things. And what we expect from Jesus, well, we don't know, right? I mean, you went to Sunday school in sixth grade, and every time they talked about Jesus going to the temple, they say, yeah, and Jesus brought his little sacrifice, and he sacrificed and ate truma. No, they even tell you about truma and who's eating food, right? I mean, we always presume that the temple is for yakking and talking and teaching, but no one goes to the temple for yakking, talking, and teaching. The only reason you go to the temple is basically for the festival and sacrifice. Wake up.
Well,
Wake
another
up.
thing we don't, it hit me is that Jesus did a mikvah on a regular basis. So he wasn't like just baptized one time. Yes, there was that great event, but he was doing the mikvah. He was technically baptized all through his childhood.
And every day, you know, like I said, why would he go to the pool at Bethsaida? He was doing the mikvah. Why? So he could take his sacrifice during the festival and he could eat it. Now, there's a great question. Remember the 5 sacrifices, right? Did he do a sacrifice for sin or guilt? Did he need to? No, he didn't need to. But you know what? Everybody gave one for guilt. So it's highly likely that he did. Because remember I told you, the early church did sacrifices until the destruction of the temple. And even then, they probably did it in Alexandria, where Hebrews was written to, because they thought they needed to. Not because they needed a sin or guilt sacrifice, remember, but because they needed it to get to the Thanksgiving sacrifice. They would have never let them get to the Thanksgiving sacrifice without doing the ascension sacrifice, the sin or guilt sacrifice, the priestly sacrifice, and then finally the Thanksgiving sacrifice. So, you know, we don't think about these things. They're common knowledge in the culture. If you were a Jewish person from that century, you would think probably differently than even a Jewish person in this century. But definitely our thinking is usually not aligned into this. So, yes, sir.
Do you think Teen Hodos continued to give the sacrifices after the temple was destroyed and they were in Alexandria, or would they have said, no, we're not going to do that anymore?
Matter of fact, when we studied Hebrews, there are multiple scriptures that tell them to stop doing it. Stop doing the sacrifice, because they were. And the reason they wanted to stop doing it is because, well, remember who won this battle? Paul won the battle of the diaspora, but the Council of Jerusalem won the Alexandria Hebrews battle. And so one of the reasons that we do because John Chrysostom, by the way, came from that area and probably was Jerusalem Council kind of guy. The reason we have Eucharist the way we do, reason we have communion the way we do is because he won. Paul lost. If Paul had won, we'd be eating Seder. We'd have lamb, right? It's great. It would be great. But because Paul lost, we don't.
The altar guild's probably glad we're not fixing that.
Because I lamb.
Just saying.
Well, remember, it's more like the potlucks, right? It's more like the Lutherans always do potlucks. But anyway, we'd have lamb potlucks, and it sounds great to me. But yes, they did. The destruction of the temple, you know, that really kind of made Paul win. And the church, to a degree, Teen Hodos, was not adrift, but they really didn't. They were trying to develop the way that they worshiped from about that time, the destruction of the temple, until John Chrysostom. John Chrysostom gave them the way to worship. You know, our worship, everybody's worship, is based in John Chrysostom's Mass. So everybody, and by the way, the Didache, we know the Didache was huge into that. Did not get rolled into our scriptures because it's a book of doctrine and not a book of history, which proves beyond a shadow of doubt, in my opinion, the historicity of the New Testament documents. Because otherwise, you don't obviously put the Didache in, but the Didache made it into all of our stuff in a different way, into our hymns, into our words, into the things we do. And likewise, the communion, the Eucharist, things got integrated into our worship through historical stuff and through Western and Greek, culture. It's astounding. I think it's astounding. I had one pastor that was studying liturgy. And that's one of the reasons I got so excited or interested in liturgy itself as a historical kind of thing, is because the liturgy, we think, oh yeah, God gave us the Book of Common Prayer. God gave us the Lutheran hymnal, which is our common prayer book, right? No, it was developed over time. And Martin Luther probably go, wow, it's not German. What's wrong with you people? Anyway, but the whole point here is Jesus was going to this place. He healed this guy. He meets him in the temple, and everybody there is there to sacrifice, eat teruma, and have a good time, right? Because festival is about a good time. You eat meat. Cool. One of 6 times you eat meat in Jerusalem or in the Hebrew calendar. So they're eating meat. They're chowing down. And Jesus identifies himself to this guy that he healed and told him to walk around peripato with your mattress. And now he's got the people around him. And so we're here, and I'm going to give you eventually the outline because we're going to get finished with this. But this is 35. That one there, that is John was the portable lamp, the one setting on fire, the one lighting you. But for into a period you were desiring to jump for joy into his source of light. And this is so pertinent because what do you have to do to make a sacrifice? You got to have a fire. The reason for the menorah in the temple, which is this high, by the way, made of gold, is to light that fire. And whether they boiled it, we think they boiled it. They did not grill the meat. They boiled the meat. Why do you think they boiled the meat instead of grilling it? What's
to make it go farther, feed more people?
That's one reason. There's another reason.
We're killing more germs. I mean, because boiling water, for more than a minute would kill a lot of germs. They didn't have refrigeration.
I don't think it's germs. There's another reason. It's in the kosher laws. What can you not eat in the kosher law? Blood. If you boil the blood, what happens? It turns into gravy. It turns into gravy. It's not blood anymore, right? So if I take grilled meat, I know you like your grilled meat rare, like I like it, medium rare, and you got blood dripping out of that meat, and that is illegal under Jewish law. But if I boil it, guess what you don't have? Oh, but it tastes terrible. I love my mother's roast, but my mother made her roast so it was like Parmesaner style, like Fischbach style. In Germany, Fischbach and Parmesan is where they make shoes. So if you ask for meat well done in Germany, they'll tell you, oh, Fischbach style, because you're eating it like a shoe leather. Oh, my mother made a great roast, but it was always cooked. So there was nothing that was red in there. And she wasn't even Jewish. So I'm like, you're cracking me up. But they boil the meat to get the blood out, because then you would not break the kosher law, right? So anyway, but it's really important to note that this is we are getting some, what he would call evidences in the writing, in the Greek writing, because Jesus is telling us stuff that we all ought to already know, but we don't, right? Because how many have made the tour to the temple for sacrifice? Not I. There is none. Temple's done. Even the temple in Alexandria is done. You can't even go see it. So anyway, I had this, the Greek irony. I pointed this out, the purpose of lamps, and now we got this one, NIV. I have testimony weightier than that of John. For the works that the Father has given me to finish, the very works that I am doing, testify. Okay, here is the irony. Remember what the joke or the irony is here. Jesus just healed this guy, and they're asking him, under what authority do you do this? Right? Why are you able to do that? Why can you do this? And Jesus is giving them a lesson. He's lessoning them. Basically, if somebody healed someone right here in such a way that it was obvious that it was God's power, miraculous power, you should all go, wow. Of course, we don't. We see things sometimes miraculous, and we go, no, we don't see that, right? But the reality is, here this happened. That in itself is a testimony and evidence. This is the whole point of John. I'll point this out to you. John is all about Simeon, all about the signs. Every sign that Jesus did, he's got a sign, it's got a huge thing about it, and then we get Jesus in the dialogue telling us what it means. Of course, we read it and it's like, oh, it's just sayings of Jesus. It's not applicable, but it is. It's totally applicable to this whole point. And so Jesus, right now, Jesus did a sign. He healed this guy. Should that sign be sufficient? But then Jesus makes his comment. He says, John testifies to it. And why does John testify to it? Because these people, remember, way back in I think it's the second chapter, first chapter, who went to John? The priests went to John. The Sadducees went to John and said, who are you? Remember? And then who went to John? The Pharisees went to John and said, who are you? Right? Remember that? That's this crowd. If we were in a movie, we go, oh, I recognize that guy. These were the people that went. As a matter of fact, Paul might have been one of those people that went to ask what John was about. Why? Why do you think Paul saw? Paul? Why do you think Paul could have been one of those guys? He was a Pharisee of Pharisees, and who was his master rabbi? Gamaliel, who was the Rabboni of Rabbonis, who was the guy. Nicodemus, I don't know, Nicodemus may have had more authority at that time, but later on, Gamaliel, who was the head, the master of Saul, basically, okay, who do you send out to do your dirty work? All your little minions, right? Yeah, your minions, your underlings, right? But anyway, now all the leadership and all the underlings and all the minions and all the guys are standing there, and this Jesus guy has healed this guy on the Shabbat and told him to carry around his mattress, and it's in the middle of a festival, and everybody's bringing the teruma, and everybody's bringing the sacrifice, and everybody's eating steak, meat that's been boiled. Yeah. But I have a greater witness than that of John, for the works which the Father hath given me to finish, the same works that I do bear witness of me that the Father has sent me. Let's see what the Greek says. Above that, the Greek, but here it is, pretty long. Ego. Ooh, ego. But ego hold the martyr, the evidence given, mesio large or small, of John, assigning a reason, the toils, who he has given to me, the Pater, the Father, in order that I should achieve the point aimed at as a limit. Telioso. Ooh, telestai. Telioso. Telos. Telos. I should achieve the point aimed at as a limit. Remember, the Greeks have a logos to an unstated telos. This is the definition of a telos. The point aimed at as a limit. Beautiful. Remember, like, the thing about this word is think about this word. It's a geometric word. Okay? If you do art, you know all about the vanishing point, right? That's what a telos is a vanishing point. And a vanishing point on the horizon is infinite until you define it. How do you define it? Your lines from your structure to your vanishing point, right? You draw your lines so they intersect at a certain point. That's the logos. And the telos is unstated. And by the way, the telos is very interesting because it's a vanishing point. Think about this. Can I really see a vanishing point? Not in real life, right? On paper, I can see it. I can draw it. But guess what? How far are we away from 3D art and vanishing points? Any idea?
I think they're doing it, but they're holograms and they're like whole meta thing. I mean,
Well, no, I mean in history. You know what I'm saying? In history, we got Jesus' time, Byzantium, right? Remember Byzantium art? Now the Greeks did 3D art. The Greeks were really good at it and had ideas about it, but they couldn't put it on three-dimensional. The three-dimensional was outside of their realm. It was Albert Dürer. You know Dürer, the guy who, one of the first guys to do 3D stuff and vanishing points. You know, it was a thing developed in the Renaissance, basically. Renaissance. We're talking like, 1400s here before really we're getting 3D art, but yet the Greeks are already talking about it. I mean, if you'd say enough Greek, you would have figured this out, right? But unfortunately, it just takes time for humanity to develop these ideas. Remember I told you Greeks are great at theory, but terrible about doing the engineering? Yeah. Now they did some pretty good sculptures, and some of the sculptures are pretty good. But you see what the Renaissance did? I just throw this out. What did the Renaissance do? What did they do intentionally to, for example, the statue of David, to fix it in perspective? You have any idea? The perspective for David is wrong unless you're looking up at it. Because the artist intentionally made the perspective so that it looks normal when you're looking upward at it from a normal, like 5-foot person male at the time of the Renaissance. Because they make the shoulders wider and the head bigger so that when you look up at it, it's smaller in perspective. They did that with a lot of statues. A lot of statues, especially the really tall statues, the perspective's totally messed up if you were to look at that statue like right in front of you. Now, we stopped doing that. In modern statues, we don't do that very often. That's really a rare thing. But the Renaissance guy, sculptors did that. Did the Greek sculptors do that? We're not sure. We think they might have a little bit because the Parthenon, they actually, when they did the Parthenon, they did some of the structure at angles so that the perspective of the structure looks correct when you're looking up at it. It's very complicated kind of stuff. And how they have so much time to think about this without good mathematics, I have no clue.
Well, the Greeks did develop good mathematics. They had, the other, I'm trying to.
This is the problem they had. They were wonderful. Archimedes, they're wonderful with geometry and with geometric stuff in concrete structure. They were not good with mathematics. What's the difference? Mike, okay, I'm sorry. We're really getting into a really important point, but this is something that's huge. A difference between mathematics and geometrical mathematics, or geometry or geometrical type gonculation. You know what the difference is? Theoretical. Yeah, theory. Zero is good, but it's theory. until we had Arabic numbers and symbols, it's symbols. So symbols. You know, Pythagoras did the Pythagorean theorem, but he didn't have a squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? He couldn't do it. He didn't have the math symbols to do that. We don't know how Pythagoras did the Pythagorean theorem. We have no clue. But we know that he developed the theorem and proved the theorem, but he did it with non-symbolic mathematics. He did it geometrically. How did they do pi? We have no clue how they did pi, or even that they had the idea of pi. Pi is an irrational number. Did you hear me? It's an irrational number. It is totally outside the bounds of the normal world or thinking. An irrational number. Wow. Impossible, right? But the Greeks figured it out, and so did the Egyptians. This stuff is huge. Yes, sir.
The whole thing of the vanishing point is all is all perspective as well. I mean, they make an argument, and the argument leads you to that conclusion. But if the argument changes, the perspective changes, your vanishing point could also change. It's all relative.
Precise. Well, it isn't all relative. The Greeks would say, if I give you an adequate logos to telos, the telos is always going to be at the correct point, or you're going to get close to it, right?
Until you change your perspective, and now the vanishing point goes over here.
The Greeks don't think that
making
way.
the argument, where you're saying the argument is strong enough, it leads you to one conclusion.
Yes, a parabola, right? I hate the fact that we call them parables. And why do we define it? You know, we define a parable as a
Earthly story with a heavenly meaning.
earthly story of the heaven. No, it isn't. Okay, yeah, okay, cool. That's really cute, but that's not what a parable is. A parabola, a parable in the Greek, is a logos to a telos, a logos with a singular telos. That is what the Greeks would say. It has to be singular. A diablo is a logos with no telos. A hyperbole, a hyperbole in the Greek is a logos with multiple telos. That's what they're against. And so when Jesus gives, it cracks me up that we have made this word parable, you know, from English, from Greek, and the parable is a logos to telos, very specific logical argument. And by the way, if we were like 150 years ago, I guess I have to change my perspective, but we were even 100 years ago learning Greek in the grammar schools in America or wherever we were, we would know what a parabola is, right? A parable. And we read it in the King James Version of the Bible that we had, we would go, oh, a parable. It's a Greek parabola. I know what this is, right? But we don't, because we don't get educated in Greek, unfortunately, and other stuff was, I think, is really important. Anyway, the teleso, the limit, themselves, the toils who I make or do, they bear witness through all of me. That is because the Father has set me apart. Here's the translation. But great I hold the evidence given of John, assigning a reason, the toils which the Father has given to me in order that I should achieve the point aimed at as a limit. They themselves, the toils which I do, bear witness through me that the Father has set me apart. Okay, what did he just say?
I'm jealous.
Yeah, the miracles that you're seeing are bearing witness.
What did he just do, though? What testimony did he just prove to be true? John's. Through his toils, through Jesus's miracle, that proves John. This is beautiful. I mean, you got to look at it this way in the Greek to see that Jesus is not necessarily just proving his own testimony. And by the way, at the very beginning of John, what did John tell us? That Jesus is the Logos, the Amar, the creation word, the God. And so now I've got Jesus through his miracle, his semeion, his signs, proving John. This is a beautiful Greek proof. beautiful Greek proof. And it's not a recursive proof. It's not a one that, one that chases itself. It's rather, John makes these statements at the very beginning that, by the way, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the priests, all see and ask John, what are you doing? Who are you? Right? And then Jesus does these signs that are the toils that bear witness through me, the Father has set me apart. What did John say about Jesus? Jesus is that guy, the Lamb of God, la, la, la. So what this is, it's a proof text to John. Very powerful, very beautiful. It directly refers to the signs of the proof of Jesus' Godhood and being, as well as the proof of John himself. And the Father who sent me has himself testified concerning me. You have never heard his voice or seen his form. And the Father himself, which has sent me, hath borne witness of me. You have neither heard his voice any time nor seen his shape. This is a cut, the big cut. And Pippas, having sent me, Father, I cast that one there. He has borne witness or testified, peri, through all over. As well as peri. Usually we translate that for, which is terrible because it means something much bigger in Greek. Emo of me, ote, not to, phone in a tone of him, or at any time have you heard, not two of you of him have you stared at. And the Father having sent me, that one there, he has borne witness through me. How did he do that? By the signs that Jesus did. Not to his tone, at any time have you heard. Not to his view have you stared at. It's an irony. It's an irony. Because what Jesus is saying is, you've seen the Father. How'd you see the Father?
I've seen my ex.
Yeah.
I'm showing that color.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Beautiful Greek irony. Unspoken tells that Jesus, there is an unspoken tells in here, because they have not seen, they have not heard, but who did? Jesus did. It's an unspoken tells. Nor does the word dwell in you, for you do not believe the one he sent. Okay. This is a, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C kind of thing, right? So Jesus is setting them up, and they should figure it out pretty quickly. You've not heard his word abiding in you, for whom he sent him ye believe not. And the logical argument, legon, the logical argument of him, nor not you hold into you staying. That or because whom he set apart at Kainos, that one there, to him you nor not are persuaded by a logical argument. And his logical argument, that is God's, you don't hold staying in you. Because whom that one there set apart, to him you are not persuaded. Again, an unstated telos. Who is the one they're not persuaded to? Jesus. And the huge irony here is, okay, Jesus, this is why, and we can never forget this, this whole time, who's standing beside Jesus? The guy with his mattress, right? And at the same time, on the other side, or close to him, are the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the priests and the Pharisees. Nicodemus and his buddies, right? They're the ones who are complaining. And by the way, they're the ones that the guy he healed, Jesus made me do it. Jesus made me do it. That's a guy. He's a guy. And Jesus, has this beautiful opportunity to beat on them. He's beating on them. Look, because right beside him is standing this guy. And so he's like, look, don't you get it? Right? John testified. John said, I was the guy. I did this. He's not saying it, right? It's evident. This is unspoken tells. That's why Greek is so beautiful. And that's why in the Greek, if you have to picture the scene. I would say this is true in all great literature anyway. When somebody writes a novel, they want you to what? Picture the setting, picture the scene. That's why I hate it when authors don't describe characters. Don't you hate that? I hate that. You get a new character, what hair color are they? What eye color are they? What do they look like? What's their face look like? I want to know. I just don't want to know, oh, it's Joyce, it's James, it's whoever. Give me some description of where I am and what I'm in, because that sets a novel and you can picture it in your mind. The problem is we read the Bible, and what do we not do? We approach it like, oh, it's Scripture. When the authors want us to approach it like, not like a fiction, but it's an account. It's a historical account. Now, if they had plenty of money and plenty of time, what would they have included if they had the technology or the mental technology? What would they have included in there? Yeah, they would have given us all the settings and details and all this stuff. What does Jesus look like? What did that guy look like? His arm was all messed up. What did the Pharisees look like? The scowling Sadducees, right? We would have gotten all those details if it was a modern novel, because this is the first iteration, as C.S. Lewis tells us, of modern literature. But they didn't. They're saving money, and they expected you to know. All they got to do is tell you, it's the pool at Bethsaida. And you've been there, right? Or if you hadn't, what do you have with you to tell you about it? Someone who had been. Especially since, guess what? A book slave carried the book of John. Or maybe someone who wasn't a book slave had learned it from a book slave. But guess what? That person had been to the temple, been to this thing. They have known Jesus, may have seen Jesus, may have seen this guy healed, may have seen the Pharisees scowling. I don't know. That's the thing. And his logical argument, you don't hold staying in you, because whom that one there set apart to him, you are not persuaded. It's Jesus. This is a unstated telos. It's Jesus. They know it too. You study the scripture diligently because you think that in them you have eternal life. These are the very scriptures that testify about me. Okay. Now he's letting the cat out of the bag. Search the scriptures, for them to think you have eternal life, and they are they which testify of me. Immerate, you search diligently the graphis, the writings. Then because you, dokiete, think in autes, in them, zoen perpetua, aeonian, inchen, to hold, and ikaniai, that thing there, essen, they are. And I should have put that in bold. They are. They bearing witness or testifying through all over. Okay, so first of all, he stated that the sign idea proves that I am God and proves what I do. The guy John proves what? The testimony of John was given to you, and my actions prove the testimony of John. And now he's moving into the next thing, which is the writings. Yes, sir.
Clearly, he's not speaking to an audience of Sadducees, because they wouldn't believe the scriptures give them eternal life.
Yes, that kind of is true. It's a clump. I think it's a clump of the priests and the Pharisees. So the priests are Sadducees. So it's probably both. But do you see what he's doing with that? What's he doing? Creating what? He's poking a bear. He's creating huge tension, because what you say is exactly right. The priests, and we don't know when this is. I suspect this is the fact that people are milling around. They're letting the food kind of digest. The sacrifices are probably over. It's becoming the end of the festival. People have eaten. They're happy. They're contented, and they're confronting, right? And so it's the after dinner talk. And so the priests are available. The Pharisees are available. They're all there. I think they're all in this kind of clump. And the guy tells on Jesus, right? And now what we're getting this beautiful argument, beautiful logos to telos, and he's giving us proof text. Remember, in a logical argument, you set your definitions, you set your assumptions, you make your logical argument, and then you make your conclusion, or in Greek, you don't. You give a telos. It's unstated. So in any case, you search diligently the writings, Hebrew writings, the Graphius. I left in Hebrew writings. It's not exactly true, but that's about all they would have been talking about. And there's also a problem there because, well, there is no problem yet. The Mishnah did not exist yet in a written form, right? So I have the Tanakh. I have basically the Tanakh. So I have the Torah, I have the prophets, Ketuvim, and I have the, whatever the other part is, the whole Tanakh. So it's the Old Testament documents. I also have the apocryphal documents because the Apocrypha existed from 250 BC. So I got the apocryphal documents, LXX, in Greek. Now we don't know when they started, but they're not allowed today to read Masoretic texts in the synagogue. In the temple, they didn't read the texts in Hebrew even. The synagogue where they read the texts. And they only had Hebrew. They didn't have Masoretic documents with pointlets. And by the way, they're not sure. We think they know how to pronounce them, but they're having problems because Hebrew is a dead language. And so it's a read language, but it's not a used language. And they're having problems. The language of the Hebrews took a huge change when the Masoretes put the pointlets on. And they use Arabic. They use the Aramaic and Arabic pointlets for the vowels. Anyway, this is huge complexity. Anyway, you search diligently the Hebrew writings because you think in them to hold life perpetual. Now, who's he talking to specifically? Pharisees, but at the same time, he's poking the Sadducees big time. And that thing there, they are bearing witness through me. What did he just do? He just big time that there is a huge proof text here. In other words, what do the scriptures, what do the Graphias prove?
Jesus is God.
And also life perpetual, right? As a matter of fact, if there is no life perpetual, is there a need for a Messiah? And by the way, how do you know I'm the Messiah? I healed this guy. And not only that, John testifies to it. La, 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 la. This is a beautiful argument in the Greek. Yet you refuse to come to me to have life. And ye will not come to me that ye might have life. He just called himself God. He just called himself the Messiah. He just said that there is life perpetual. He just said that the scriptures prove whom? Me. Yeah.
He's bringing life perpetual. That perpetual life is referring to him.
And no or not, Galete, you will or desire. That's the word they use about God all the time. Will or desire to come or go forward to me in order that life eshete, you may hold. And you desire not to come forward to me in order that you may hold life. That you may hold life. Remember, you know, the Orthodox, the Sadducees don't believe in life eternal. They don't believe that in resurrection. They don't believe in that stuff. The Pharisees believe in a resurrection of the body. Jesus is saying, told Nicodemus, what else do you got?
Spirit.
You got a soul, spirit, pneuma, the Greek thing, pneuma. And so he's talking to them about life. And when he says life, he means sarx suke pneuma. He's talking about the Greek thing. The thing that he already proved through John to you, that you already should be remembering back to Nicodemus. The fact that the Pharisees are there and he keeps, you know, he's referring to the Pharisees. You know how he's, you see how he's referring to the Pharisees, right? Without even saying Pharisees. Because who did he invoke? The name of John, that previously John told you that the priests went to John and the Pharisees went to John. And therefore he invokes John. The author expects you to remember way back in chapter 1 and 2 when he was talking about John. This is a problem with Greek logos telos, because the Greeks in the ancient world, people were, I hate to say smart enough, their attention spans were long enough that they could remember, the whole chapters. Today, our attention spans, according to the media, about 20, 15 minutes maybe?
Yeah.
And most kids are about 2 seconds to 2 minutes, something like that, right? Your attention span is as long as a commercial, right? Anyway, and you desire not to come forward to me in order that you may hold life. And you desire not to come forward to me in order that you may hold life. I do not accept glory from human beings. And this is a beautiful point. I receive not honor from men. This is really kind of a big deal right here, because we just get a clue. Have a clue. Doxa. Literally, this means what evokes good opinion, inherent intrinsic worth, glory. From para, anthropon, men, nor not lambano, I take hold of. It's not receive, it's lambano. Lambano means to grasp, always means to grasp. It does not mean to receive. I don't care how many times you've heard it, it means to grasp in Greek. What evokes good opinion, inherent intrinsic worth of glory? From humans, I do not take hold of. And what is really important about this statement is, who is he obviously talking to? He's, okay, set it up. You got a whole host of the Jews. You got Pharisees, Sadducees in the temple. And who did he just bring up? Doxa. Who's into doxa?
Romans.
The Romans. Isn't that interesting? He's speaking to Hebrews in Greek, using a Greek logos telos, and his not quite in statement. His not quite in statement is, doxa is nothing to me. Doxa is dead to me. Doxa is dead to me. This is a direct talk to Romans, which might imply, now we obviously know, or we think, or I project to you, that John was probably written to a Latin or Roman audience. This could also infer that who else is in this crowd?
Jews.
Well, I'll give you even more. I wrote it in my book, Centurion. And we know this is true because it's also in other Gospels. Who kept an eye out in the portico of the Gentiles, in the court of the Gentiles? The Romans. The Romans from the fortress of Antonia. The fortress of Antonius, they looked down into the courts. They could keep an eye on what those Jews were doing, right? And in my book, Centurion, as Benadar and his legions, his legionnaires, would go into the temple courts to keep an eye on the festivals. Guess what? What do you think the Romans are doing? Yeah. And they're not just spies. Well, they're Roman legionnaires wearing the Roman legionnaire poop, their stuff, their clothing, right? All their clothing, their armor, and they are there.
Intimidating.
Yeah, and I don't think they cared to be in my book, I tried to picture the idea that, yes, the Romans wanted to intimidate. To intimidate what? So they wouldn't do what? Revolt or get stuff a-going, right? And we know they're there, and they're looking down, and when they see a commotion like the
Tables, maybe. When Jesus threw the tables around, I bet they
yeah.
intervened.
Plus, if people are eating festival foods, maybe, illegally, they're like taking a chunk here and there. Maybe not. It's boiled meat, but still, that's the best thing. If you remember in my book, all they got was gruel and beer, and maybe some cheese every now and then, and that's all the Roman legions would feed them, wheat gruel usually, unless they were bad. They give them barley gruel. Oh, they hated barley gruel. That is so documented. That's like kasha. The Russians eat kasha, which is barley gruel. Oh, I feel sorry for them. Anyway, apparently if you eat it long enough, you love it, but I'm not so sure. But this is obviously talking to Romans. But I know that you do not have the love of God in your hearts. Yeah, that doesn't sound very Greek, does it? Let's see what it says. But I know you have not the love of God in you. This
Kind
is
of insulting. I'm just saying. I mean, like, that's a big
Oh, yeah, that's a
That's
big
like-
slap.
well, it depends on what he says, right?
I think he's been calling the Pharisees and the Sadducees idiots for the last several verses.
Yeah.
Well, he did. Remember from Nicodemus on. Nicodemus, he said, "What? You're the smartest guy in Israel, and you don't know this, right?" I mean, that was a pretty good slap.
Yeah.
But I know that you have not loved God in you. All other things, contrariwise, ignoka, that's gnosis. I have known you, that are because the agape, a love like the gods of a God, no or not, you hold into yourselves. Remember, it's really important what word he uses in describing this. And the word he uses is agape. Contrariwise, I have known you because a love like the gods of the God you do not hold in yourself. This is really high Greek irony. This is huge Greek irony. Because can a human being have the love of the gods? Nope, only the gods can have the love of the gods. Agape is something that only gods can have. What did he just say about himself? He's God. And he's going to say that again. Anyway, they're not gods. It's an irony. It's also in the tells. Jesus can have the love of the gods because he is God, right? He uses a word. Now, if he used a word like, let's say, use phileos, love of shield warriors. Oh yeah, I can have the love of shield warriors. You're wrong. I have the love of shield warriors, right? Or if you use eros, or which isn't what you think it means, pathos, which is not what you think it means either. It's more like eros in our thinking. Pathos or eros or storge or phileo, or take your pick. There's like about 8. I don't have the list right at my fingertips, but there's about 8 words for love and like in Greek. And by the way, ladies, none of them really means like love in our definition. And be careful if you're picking up guys in other countries, because many times the word love translated in their culture is not at all what it is in our culture, and that includes Western cultures, because love does not, the definition for amore in French does not mean the same as love in English. And courtly love, which is the basis for modern Western love, is very different than what we even compare love. And by the way, Hollywood thinks love is all sex, but that's another problem. It isn't, it can't be. But anyway, the love of the gods. I have come in my Father's name, and you do not accept me. But if someone else comes in his own name, you will accept him. Now, this is a really interesting statement, and I'm not sure exactly how to take it or what to do with it. I have come in my Father's name, you receive me not. If another shall come in his own name, him you will receive. Ego. Ego, aletheia, have come or gone into a name, to the name. Whenever this onomatia, when it says a name, the name, that means God. The of the Father, of me, and no or not, lambato, you take hold of me, and in the case that allos or other should come or go into the onomatia, to the name, to the own self, that one there, lempsithe, you will take hold of. I have come in the name of my Father, and you will not take hold of me. in case that another should come in his own name, that one there you will take hold of. Okay, I don't know if this is supposed to be a prediction, a future tense kind of thing. It does use a future tense. I don't know if it means that, other gods or other testimonies, other people, or whatever. The most important point there, I think, though, is I have come in the name of my Father, and you will not take hold of me. I think this is a beautiful picture. Yes, sir.
Could they be alluding back to the fact that in other times they've had messiahs in every year, and they were willing to accept those messiahs?
Yeah, here it is.
Yeah.
It seems like a big irony to
You hear
me.
the
Here
they have
I
the real
am
one and
coming
they
in the
don't
name of
accept
the Father, and you're mad about it because you think I'm blasphemous or whatever. But all these other guys who are just in their own name, just regular people, you were okay with that.
I think you're right on money. I think that's really what it's getting to. I don't think it's a future as much as it's what has happened in the apocryphal era, because we know the Maccabees, right? The Maccabees in every era, and Jesus says it. I don't know where he said it, but anyway, in the Maccabean era, they had a Messiah in every era because they had a priest and they had a king illegally placed, right? And now you got Jesus, and the irony here, of course, is that right beside him is the guy that he healed. And you got the testimony of John, and Jesus says you have the testimony of the Tanakh, of the Hebrew writings, right? And I've come in the name of my Father, you will not take hold of me, in case that another should come in his own name, that one there you will take hold of. And does this mean Herod, the Herodian guys? Does this mean the Romans? They asked the Romans in, it was their own fault, right? Does it mean Barabbas? Does it mean other, so-called messiahs, right? I don't know. It's really, I think you're probably right when you say it. But notice what it says. How can you believe such, since you accept glory from one another, but do not seek the glory that comes from the only God? Oh, we're out of time. The important thing, I guess we'll finish up. I'll give you an outline, because I think we got two more, and that's it. But the big deal here, I'll leave you with this idea to think about. You notice they use the word doxa again. Doxa. And doxa is a Roman thing. So I've got the Roman. I'm obviously in this text speaking to Romans, whether it's directly or indirectly. Directly being Jesus talking to Romans at that specific place, or indirectly, that is John writing to Romans in the book of John. Obviously, I think Jesus used these words, but the point is that this is to the Romans. This is to Romans, to the Roman structure. And so I just think it's really interesting that you not see the doxa that cometh from God. Thank you, Father, your word. I pray you look at us this week. In your name we pray.